Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com.
Welcome to the April 2021 Community IT Innovators webinar. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Cybersecurity Readiness for Nonprofits. Today we're going to provide you with the latest information on how to protect your organization from the wide range of cybersecurity threats now faced by nonprofits. I'm really looking forward to hearing more from our CTO, Matthew Eshelman, about this very important topic. My name is Johan Hammerstrom. I'm the CEO of Community IT and the moderator for our webinar series. The slides and recording for today's webinar will be available on our website and YouTube channel later this week. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel to receive automatic updates when we post new webinar recordings. Please use the chat feature to ask questions throughout the webinar, and we'll do our best to respond. Before we begin, we'd like to tell you a little bit more about our company. Community IT is a 100% employee-owned company. Our team of 37 staff is dedicated to helping nonprofit organizations advance their missions through the effective use of technology. We're technology experts, and we've been consistently named a top 501 managed services provider by Channel Futures, and we received that honor again in 2020. And now, I'll hand things over to our CTO, Matthew Eshelman. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks, Johan, for the introduction. It's always love to hear that intro, that 100% employee-owned company. It's great to work with so many great employee owners at Community IT. And of course, we get to work with so many wonderful nonprofit organizations. And I've gotten to do that for, quite a long time. So I'm happy to be here today to talk about the Cybersecurity Playbook for nonprofits and get to join you this month. It was last year in February to talk about the Cybersecurity Incident Report, and look forward to seeing how those results from the incident report have now made it into the playbook in terms of recommendations. So let's go ahead and get started. You should have all gotten a link to go ahead and download the Cybersecurity Readiness for Nonprofits playbook from our website. I think you may have to jump through another form capture, but go ahead and encourage you to download that. That did go out earlier today. If you've already had a chance to read it and to take notes, that's great. I'd encourage you, as Johan said, to go ahead and just chat them in. We do have some time for Q&A at the end, but also if there's anything that strikes you during the webinar or during one of my slides, I'd really invite that conversation. So Johan will be managing that back channel, and we'll have some time for conversation at the end as well. So to talk a little bit about our agenda, start with a little bit of background about the cybersecurity landscape that we find ourselves in now. I think it's good to level set the operating environment that we find ourselves in. We'll talk really briefly about educational technology. This cybersecurity playbook is really focused on kind of regular organizations and the challenges that they face. We think EdTech is a little bit unique in that regard. So talk briefly about that topic. Again, if you have questions, please feel free to chat them in, and then really spend the bulk of our time diving into the actual playbook itself and the recommendations that we've made there in the three different categories, which we've framed out as being foundational, cybersecurity controls, those that we've deemed as proactive, and those that we've talked about as being optimized. And then finally, I think it's really important that we spend some time talking about how we can take these recommendations and move them into action. There's a ton of other cybersecurity playbooks out there. There's lots of other resources that are available. I'm really glad that you've chosen to spend some time here with me going over what we see as being appropriate for nonprofit organizations. But I think all the recommendations and all the playbooks in the world don't really make much good if we're just going to kind of read them and acknowledge them, maybe put a plan and put it on the shelf. So I think it's important that as part of the playbook, we have some time to map out how we're going to take action and implement some of the recommendations here. So let's go ahead and get started with some background information. So here we have the some graphics that is from the FBI's IC3 complaint statistics. So this is representative of the data from the last 5 years. So again, if you may have been involved in some sort of like a cybercrime activity, you may have reported that to the FBI. They compile all that data and then generate a report. And so we can see here pretty clearly that, in the last 5 years, the number of complaints has steadily increased, and then along with the amount of financial damages that have been caused by cybersecurity incidents. So again, over $13 billion in total losses, and that's direct financial loss, has been reported and investigated by the FBI. And so we can see that in 2020, that number is over $4 billion. So clearly, cybersecurity and issues represents a real and significant financial impact to organizations and people. And it's important that we as organizations are taking steps to secure the data that we have access to. So before we get too far into that, I did want to get a sense of the folks that are here today. And one of that is just getting some questions. So again, question here, want to see how many folks attending the webinar today have gotten some IT policies at your organization. So again, you can just chat that out. So does your organization have a comprehensive set of IT policies? It could be yes, no, maybe just acceptable use in the employee handbook. So go ahead and chat that out. We'll leave that open for a second or two here as we get a sense for where the audience is today. So great, thanks for chatting that out. I'll reflect that back out. So we can see that most folks attending today are in that category where they do have some IT, maybe compliance policy language just in their IT handbook, within the smallest percentage saying, yes, we've got a set of comprehensive policies. So again, I think there'll be something here for everybody, for organizations that are just getting started and maybe need to work on some foundational security controls, to those organizations that maybe have done some of the policy work already and then are ready to move on to implementing some more sophisticated or complex controls to help improve the security at their organization. And then since I got you here, I will do one more slide, which is how many organizations have implemented multi-factor authentication. So you'll see some choices there in terms of, yes, you've implemented it for all staff, for some staff, just the admins, or not at all. So again, multi-factor authentication, we'll talk about it later, combines something that you know, which is your password, and then something that you have, which is often a physical, like an authenticator device. Most often that's going to be an app on your phone, but it could also be a physical token for certain cases. So again, curious to see where folks are at in terms of the implementation of multi-factor authentication. Okay, so thanks for providing that insight. I think it's super helpful, and it looks like relatively evenly distributed between those organizations that have done it for all staff, which is great, 35%, 31% for some staff, at very small number with admins only, and then about 30% of you have said no, not at all. So if you're in that category, hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll be convinced that that's the number one thing that you need to tackle. So thanks for sharing that. I appreciate the information from folks here on the webinar today. And also, I wanted to include that so we could reflect how you're doing compared to the overall internet sector at large. So this was taken from a report that Microsoft put together. I think we have the link for that. Microsoft put out a report called Nonprofit Guidelines for Cybersecurity, along with, so that's a report that they did alongside of N10. It's representative of a survey of about 50 organizations, so actually not that many compared to the sector as a whole, obviously. But in that sampling, we see that most organizations didn't have a policy in place in terms of how they would handle risk. The vast majority of those organizations had not implemented multi-factor authentication. So again, congratulations, you're doing better than average. And it's also, I think, maybe reflective of, this was about 2 years ago, so we can see there has been some progress over time. See, most organizations didn't have a policy around the use of unsecured wireless or Bluetooth, and then a large number of organizations reported that staff could access information from any device. So there's no BYOD policy controls, no technology controls in place either to help protect organization data and to put up some guardrails. So again, I think it's interesting to see these numbers, and I think interesting to see how they change over time. I would say community IT, we would have about probably 65% of our clients have enrolled staff in multi-factor authentication for all users. So I think we're doing a little bit better than average, but I think that there's still a long way to go in that regard. So specifically talking about the nonprofit cybersecurity incidents, this is the big chart that came from our presentation in February, where we looked at the nonprofit incident report, which is a collection of all the data that we've gathered in supporting about 5,600 users across the US in terms of their cybersecurity incidents. The things to highlight here, I wanted to show that we've got a lot of account compromises. So again, there's two different scales here, so just be mindful of that. But the number of account compromises was up, even as we had more and more organizations enroll in multi-factor authentication. The number of spam incidents continues to be very high, indicating, I think, to some extent, an increase in training and awareness, and we encourage our clients to submit those messages if there's ever any question. And then we also see there's a big increase in what we would call business email compromise or spear phishing. So those are the types of messages that combine some unique information about you and your organization so that they can get the threat actor can get you to do something, provide a username and password combination, maybe buy a gift card, maybe update a wire transfer information. So again, these are all types of very common threats that we see facing nonprofit organizations. And the number of incidents has only grown over time. So we first compiled this report with data from 2018. And that year we recorded 233 different security incidents. In 2019, we recorded just over 500 security incidents. And then last year, we recorded almost 700 security incidents. So again, we can see the number of incidents is only increasing over time. So I don't think we're going to get to a point where there's less need for cybersecurity controls. And so to some extent, there's an ever-pressing need to continue to grow and evolve and improve the protections and controls that we have in place at our organizations. So taking a little bit of just a note to talk about cybersecurity for EdTech, I would say that in general, some of the same principles apply. And again, we typically think of EdTech in a couple of different categories. We have administrative staff, we have teachers, and we have students. All the data needs to be protected. There do tend to be some unique operating environment or operating challenges in supporting particularly student access to information. With COVID and so many organizations going virtual, throwing so much online technology at students with so many different passwords to manage and access, taking deliberate control to protect those accounts and that data is very important. Additionally, we do see schools being targeted by ransomware actors. I know in Baltimore County, they're still suffering from the effects of a massive ransomware campaign that impacted their school district back in November of 2020. So again, for more information on that, you can go to our website where we have a set of best practices that we've developed, focused specifically on cybersecurity for the education space. And I encourage you to follow that. I think the rest of the presentation today will be focused more on organizational cybersecurity controls. I think they're all still relevant as well. Just acknowledging that the education space operates a little bit of a unique environment. So in terms of how we approach cybersecurity and approach these controls, you may have seen this graphic before, recognizing that we want to root everything in security policy We want to build on that with a layer of security awareness training that we're providing to staff. So we're equipping our users with the tools and education they need to help protect the organization. And then finally, we get to the technology control piece. So there, the technology controls, focusing on those elements around our digital identity, the data that we have access to, the devices that are being used to access that information, the network perimeter, such as it is, in this COVID and kind of work from home environment, perimeterless maybe is a better analogy. Or so, your home office, your home computer, that may be the extent of the network perimeter. And then also, the access of websites, both the website of your organization and the website of your the web properties of your organization, and how you are getting to the internet yourself as a consumer of technology. And then layered on top of that is this idea that there are new and I think pretty cool elements of technology that really incorporate some AI and some machine learning techniques to help improve the security, to provide better technology solutions to help secure organizations. And as we look at how, moving from how we look about security into our assessments for those 8 different areas, representing those controls in some sort of a maturity model. We've broken them up into just these 3 categories of foundational, optimized, and proactive. You could argue that there could be a lot of gradations in there, but again, I think it's important that you have a sense of kind of walk before you can run. Maybe is the analogy here is that spending a lot of money on like very high-end security tools, you may get some benefit out of that, but if you haven't been able to implement the foundational controls, then there's still going to be significant gaps in what your organization is exposed to. So again, I find this helpful to look at these controls through these different lenses. Again, it's not an all or nothing approach. You may choose or be able to implement some things in the proactive level along with foundational or optimized. You don't have to have, this is not Maslow's hierarchy of needs where you have to have everything satisfied before you can go on to the next level. But understanding if you're choosing to make some investments, I would definitely recommend starting with the foundational layer to make sure that you've got those key elements in place. Also in the report, I did want to highlight that I included some budget numbers to help provide some context to the recommendations that they're making. So they are ballpark costs, I would say, based on an organization size of about 25 users. So again, the dollar costs that you'll see in the report itself are good estimates, good budgeting estimates that would include the cost both of the technology, if there's technology solutions, or people cost in terms of either external consulting from us or even from costs from your own organization in terms of time, energy, focus to get some of these things implemented. So again, ranging from low cost solutions, maybe free to $2,000 a year, all the way up to solutions that maybe more than $15,000 a year to implement. So again, in the cybersecurity world, there can be a whole range of costs whenever we look at the options available to us. So in the playbook itself, there is some budgetary guidelines that you can use to get a sense of how much a particular solution may cost to get implemented. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into some of the key foundational controls. And you can see here that we do start with policy. So tying back to that first question I asked, how many people had IT acceptable use policy? I think we were about maybe about 50% had some elements of that in their employee handbook. That's great. I would say start there. It probably needs to get built out a little bit. And then in addition to what would be a general IT acceptable use policy governing, what you can and cannot do with an organization's computer or IT systems. I think it's also important to include elements of data privacy. So again, as many nonprofits, they're either providing services to people and have potentially sensitive information collected about their constituents. They also may have donor information about the people that are supporting them financially. So again, a data privacy policy is an important element as part of those foundational controls. I think it's also important to include a formal incident response policy as part of your foundational controls. We have a link on our website for guidelines for establishing what that incident response policy needs to contain and needs to include. I think many nonprofit organizations were kind of shocked into creating one last year whenever Blackbaud suffered their data breach of their hosted platform. And many organizations really needed to scramble to come up with and execute an incident response plan because of the external factors that they were kind of thrown into. So this is an area where the incident response policy doesn't need to be very extensive. It doesn't necessarily need to be very lengthy, but it does need to be articulated. It does need to be tested so that if and when, and maybe not even if, but a question of when your organization suffers some sort of data breach, either of a hosted system, maybe your internal network, but you have a clear roadmap to follow in terms of who needs to communicate with stakeholders, what's your technology provider going to do. But again, make sure all those roles are clear so that it can be executed whenever you're in a stressful situation. Let's see. And then the final element here, just around policy, is just an insurance review. You'll see that we talk about insurance later on as well. But again, I think it's important to understand what's included in your current policies. Insurance policies. I would also highlight that I worked with TechSoup to develop a cyber liability insurance course that you're able to access there. It's low cost, but just to get some understanding of what all is involved when it comes to cyber liability insurance, understanding how it maybe is different from your existing liability and property liability coverage that you have. Moving into controls around security awareness, again, at the foundational level, you may be able to take advantage of free or very low cost staff trainings. Again, through TechSoup, there's a free 101 and 201 cybersecurity course that's available as part of their partnership and grant with Microsoft that I developed. And then this year, I also did cybersecurity training as part of our monthly webinar series. That's available free on YouTube. So again, that's great to get started in terms of just providing some basic education to staff. Because as I said, I think you can invest a lot of money in expensive technology controls, but if your users are just going to click on links and open stuff and use technology poorly, they're going to subvert all those technology controls. And so it's important to focus on staff education and training and enlist them as allies in your goal to protect the organization's data. Moving into some of the foundational technology controls, I think this list seems to get longer and longer over time in terms of the number of things that I think are key that every organization needs to have in place. And that really does start with multi-factor authentication. I think we see that the threats and the attacks on online identities is the biggest risk that's facing organizations. And so, judging by all the logs that we look at, there are just kind of ongoing, persistent brute force attacks going on against any system that you can log into online. And so protecting that digital identity is just absolutely critical for protecting an organization's data. So again, turning on multi-factor authentication involves something which is your password, and then something you have, which is an app on your phone in most cases. And again, these controls are often free to implement. It takes a little bit of staff training. My sense, after having done quite a few of these, is that in general, staff are really good and comfortable in signing up for these services with a little bit of training and help. And so it's not that big of a time investment for an organization to make this transition. The technology is available and it's really easy to use and adopt. Kind of following on the heels for protecting identity is focusing on the password manager. You've heard me talk in other sessions. My message is you basically need two passwords. You need the password to your computer. You need the password to your password manager. Everything else should be automatically generated and stored within the password manager, so that you're choosing, new, complex, unique passwords for every different system that you're logging into. I have access to hundreds and hundreds of systems. I want them all to be very secured through passwords that I can't remember, so that every time I'm using a new system, I'm generating a unique password. And if that system ever gets compromised, then it's not going to lead to an exploit of other systems that I have access to. So again, password manager is a really key element of those foundational cybersecurity controls. There's a number of them out there. I use LastPass. I know Dashlane is available on TechSoup for a bit of a discount. There's 1Password. There's a lot of different tools out there that can help make managing passwords a lot easier. Backups are also on our list of foundational controls. I think it's also important that we acknowledge that as data has gone to the cloud, many of us think it's out of sight, out of mind, and the provider is going to back it up for us. And that's not necessarily true. So our recommendation is that for any data that you have in a cloud system, that you also need to have that data backed up somewhere else that you can have access to it. The providers are going to protect your data to some extent, but they're doing it to protect themselves first, not you. So again, if you're using Google or Office 365 or Salesforce or Box or Dropbox or any of those platforms, there's still a risk of data loss, even though the data is in the cloud and there's some protections on there. So again, we recommend the use of a third-party backup system that the organization has control of, so that if there is loss, either due to intentional damage through a disgruntled employee or accidental damage through a ransomware or a crypto attack, you're able to recover that data from a different system. Moving along, it's important for, again, these may seem like basics, but making sure your operating system is up to date and making sure your third-party applications are up to date as well. So again, Microsoft has really forced this issue in terms of making updates a lot harder to ignore with Windows 10, but it's also in response to the very real security risks that exist with running out-of-date operating systems and out-of-date applications. We also see antivirus listed here. That's considered a core control. It's not 100% effective. We do see still quite a few, kind of malware-style attacks. It's, I think, less than it has been over time. So I think we're in a lull in terms of kind of traditional malware that antivirus can protect against. It's still an important piece to have deployed across your systems. And I think it's important to be able to have it not only deployed, but also verified. So again, we deploy antivirus. We spend a lot of time and energy making sure that the system's up to date, it's active, it's getting the most recent definitions, because if it's just deployed but not up to date, then it's not providing as much protection as it can. And then the next two controls here we see really focus on email, protecting against email-based threats. From the graph before, we see that spam messages and business email compromise messages are kind of the top two threats that we see coming into our help desk. And I think spam, mostly annoying, but potentially has some malicious elements into it in terms of maybe malicious attachments. I think the real threat that causes real damage is around business email compromise protection, or business email compromise, or also potentially known as spear phishing, where messages will try to get you to take some action. So again, there may not be anything explicitly malicious in the message. There may just be a link to a website. The website itself isn't holding malware or going to run a virus on your computer, but it's going to steal your credentials. It's going to ask you to put in your password so that you can get access to a file that your boss sent you, or it's going to invite you to fill out a form from a partner that you work with. And so being able to protect against those threats is, I think, really important to lower the stress that we see from staff. I mean, everybody can ignore the generic spam, the Viagra ads and all of that junk is easy to ignore. It's a lot harder for people to ignore that email that looks like it's coming from their supervisor, or looks like it's coming from their boss, to ask them to do something. So I think it's important to implement a specific control to block those types of threats. And then finally, I wanted to highlight website protection. And so this would be for your organization's website properties. I must say I was surprised by the number of folks in the survey for the webinar who said, you know, when we asked like, hey, have you experienced any cybersecurity incidents? How many people had said, oh yeah, our website was compromised? I would say there was maybe 10 or 15 respondents saying, yeah, our website was hacked. And so again, I think that just shows the need to have protections. Again, just because you've got your website hosted with a vendor doesn't mean that the website itself is being updated or it's being protected against these kind of ongoing malicious attacks. So implementing some basic security controls around your website to make sure that if you're using a popular CMS like WordPress, that the plugins are being updated, the system itself is being updated, potentially adding in some additional web controls through vendors like Cloudflare, who can help filter some traffic and provide an additional layer of protection is an important foundational piece. So again, I think there's a lot of stuff in here, and I feel like I've moved more and more technology controls into foundational over time because I think we've really seen the impact that they can have to an organization if they're not there. So now we get to move into a little bit of what I would consider maybe more of the proactive section. So again, if you're with me so far and you said, hey, great, I'm done, I checked all those things off the box, that's great. I'm really glad to hear it. So now we'll talk about some of the controls that I think are important to focus on once you get the basics done. And so that would be on the policy side, and maybe organizational assessment side would be the risk assessment piece. So again, if you've got all the foundational controls underway, that's great. It's probably a good opportunity to take a look at to take a more formal look at the risk that you face as an organization. Maybe look at the types of adversaries your organization has, if any, the type of risk you face from the partners that you use. Just go through your systems to identify what may be at risk, what the impact could be, so that you can make an informed decision around which technology investments to make to protect those systems. I also think at this category, it's also worth looking into cyber liability insurance for policy. So again, it's very unlikely that if you've not explicitly purchased cyber liability insurance, that your current insurance coverage is going to protect you against things like ransomware or data breaches or any of that. So I think it's important for organizations to kind of pursue and purchase coverage that's going to address that specifically. And I would say this is an area where we're also seeing a lot of change. When I first started talking about cyber liability insurance, it was a very basic application. Basically, didn't matter what you put into it, but you could get coverage. Now that's really changed just even this year, where the applications have gotten a lot longer, and it seems like the choices that people are, or how you are able to respond. So again, have you implemented multi-factor authentication? Do you have a incident response plan? Do you have data encryption in place? Those all have a meaningful impact in terms of if you'll get a policy or how much it'll cost. And so, I would say guidance that I was giving a year or so ago, which was like, hey, it doesn't matter what you answer, like they're just writing policies, I think is starting to shift. And so, as we saw from the very early slides, the amount of cybercrime that is occurring with real financial impact continues to go up. And so the cyber, the cost to insure all of those losses is going to go up as well. So I think organizations are going to need to actually be compelled to make some of those changes because the insurance coverage is going to demand it. So again, I think be curious to hear from folks if that's been their experience as well, in terms of having maybe a more difficult time with their cyber liability insurance renewals, or just even purchasing insurance in the first place. And then the final note we have here in the policy section is really around BYOD. So again, I think nonprofit organizations have really enjoyed a flexibility with access to information, and we've treated it as a benefit. Hey, it's great, I can access my organizational email from my personal computer. There's not all these hoops that we have to jump through, but information is open and accessible. I think that's also going to start to become an issue as well, as the risk of that approach becomes more aware. Again, as more and more data gets moved into the cloud, it's easier to access. We don't have this walled garden of you're in the office on a work computer, that's the only way you can access the data. Now we're shifting to, oh, you're working from home, you're working from the coffee shop, you can access all the organizational information. What happens, whenever you offboard an employee, all their data, all your organization data is synced to their personal computer. What remediation do you have to protect that, to retract that data, to make sure that it doesn't leave? So again, that starts with policy. To govern that, write down, are folks allowed to use personal devices to access information? If they do, are you providing a stipend for that? There's a lot of elements that can go into the BYOD policy, and I think it's an important step to take. I think most organizations up until this point have really been, again, out of sight, out of mind. It hasn't been addressed, and I think that that's starting to change. As we move into the security awareness element, I think here's where we really see the implementation of a formal learning management system to govern training. So shifting from, hey, here's some training that's available in the employee handbook, or here's some static resources that we're going to make available that you can do on your own, transitioning into a formal learning management system where you can prescribe certain courses, you can track employees' progress, you can identify folks that maybe need some additional training or additional resources, you can test them. We use KnowBe4 for security awareness training. It also does test phishing, which is really great. So we can test, we test our staff, who's clicking on these phishing messages that are getting through. What does it look like? The same thing happens for organizations, and we see really dramatic improvements. Again, we'll do test phishing, we'll provide some training, and we can really see the rate where staff are clicking on emails that they shouldn't really drops significantly. So, and we're also seeing that these learning management tools, like KnowBe4, are really expanding their use and adoption. So again, they are providing cybersecurity training first and foremost, but then they've also added in elements of, how to handle personally identifiable information. There's some GDPR training elements that are included in the platform that we have access to. There's HIPAA compliance training that gets included. It's available in multiple languages. So again, it's a really broad platform that I think more and more organizations are able to use and to plug in to provide meaningful training resources to their staff to just raise the level of their education and awareness. The list of proactive controls here, I think in the technology side, again, is still long. So there's lots of things to do here as well. So specifically, single sign-on. So again, a password manager, and this may get in a little bit of the technical weeds. So a password manager, you're copying and pasting a username and a different password into every single site that you're accessing. Single sign-on basically combines all of that and allows you to use one identity to access multiple systems. So it uses some technologies called SAML or OAuth as a way to provide that authentication. The benefit there is that if you are able to integrate your organization's systems that you use for productivity into a single sign-on, you're able to easily offboard people. So again, many organizations, you've got 10, 15, 20 different cloud systems that you're providing access to people to. So whenever you offboard somebody, you also have to take access away from 20 different systems and have to remember to do it. With single sign-on, you have a single egress point into your network. And so you can just deactivate their work identity, and then all the access to those other systems goes away as well. So again, super helpful technology as a way to provide better auditing and accountability for access to corporate systems. Also wanted to raise in here, some different data management or data governance controls. Microsoft would call that DLP. So if you're in Office 365, there's a really rich set of data loss prevention modules that are available within the SharePoint platform that can help you identify and block or take action on locations where you may have sensitive data like social security numbers, like credit card numbers. If you are an organization that has to deal with HIPAA compliance, there's HIPAA-focused security controls that are available through the DLP engine. So again, formalizing some of those compliance requirements and then using the technology controls to help support that. I've included BIOS and driver updates as a proactive control. That also may seem like a throwback, but it's interesting. I was reading a note from Brett Arsenault, who's the CISO for Microsoft. They just put out a survey that said over 80% of organizations have experienced firmware-based attacks in the last 2 years, and identifying device firmware as an area that's really being exploited. So firmware, again, is kind of the underlying system that helps a computer operate. Several years ago, we actually upgraded our centralized management system to be able to automatically update the BIOS information for Dell computers, specifically in reaction to the malware that was targeted BIOS as a way to exploit systems. So again, these systems are out there and available, but it takes some intentionality to do. So again, updating the BIOS, updating drivers can be exploited as well. Requires some more sophisticated technology to make it happen, but it is available, and it's clear that this is an area that Microsoft is seeing some increase in terms of the attacks in this area. Talking about BYOD control, so you see we had policy in the last slide, now complemented with some technology controls as well, so that we can ensure that if we say by policy only work computers can access organizational data, you can implement some additional controls to provide technical validation and verification that is indeed true. So if the organization computer needs to be joined to Azure Active Directory, it needs to be compliant, it needs to be encrypted, and then it can access the data. If it doesn't meet those categories, then it can't meet, it can't access the data. So again, BYOD control, I think, is the technology implementation of the policy work that you did already. Endpoint detection and response is an evolution, or the next gen AV, it's sometimes also referred to. So AV, relies typically on a more static analysis. Here's this virus signature. We're going to compare files to see if they match known signatures, and if they do, we're going to block it. Endpoint detection and response is really an evolution of that. Tools will be able to identify known malware, but then they'll also be able to look for PowerShell scripts that are doing things that are unexpected or unique, antivirus. And so it's able to do analysis of systems based on behavior, not just static signature analysis. So again, these tools are a little bit more expensive, but provide a lot more value. And then often can be integrated into other security systems and provide more detailed and rich logging history, so that you can go and, again, track down, what applications a user may have accessed or what system processes are running on a computer at a certain time. So again, a really rich set of features that are available through these endpoint detection and response systems. So again, the vendors that you'll see in this space are going to be ones like SentinelOne and CrowdStrike, which are ones we've used, Carbon Black. There's a whole cottage industry of in this sector, because it's a very hot space, and I think really does provide a lot of value. And then the final technology control here is around web filtering. So this would be on personal computers or organizational computers getting access to the web. So again, we know that the number of viruses that are delivered through email is actually relatively low, but we are seeing lots of malicious content that's attempted to be launched through websites or malformed websites themselves. So having a tool in place that can do what's called some type of DNS filtering, so that they can block known malicious sites, is really a helpful layer of protection. So again, you can prevent the computers from even going to malicious sites in the first place. So again, sites that may be running cryptojacking software or some kind of malicious advertising that's going to inject it into an unpatched browser, for example. So, we use Cisco Umbrella. Again, Cloudflare has a web browsing or a DNS filter tool. So again, there's a lot of tools out there that are able to provide this protection. And I think as a longtime customer, I think it's been a really effective piece of our overall control that we include as part of our device management to make sure the devices that we support are really secured and protected from a layer of different technologies. So we move into the optimized section. Maybe fewer controls here, but maybe no less more, I think, sophisticated. So again, I think by this point, an organization is probably ready for a formal business continuity plan. I think for many organizations, this past year has been a living example of what you're actually doing. So it may be good to write it down. I would say that business continuity planning is not just an exercise for the IT staff to take on. That's something that's typically led, from the executive layer at the organization. I know at Community IT, our CFO led our business continuity planning. I provided input as part of the technology perspective, but this is really a kind of focus around the operations of the business. And so I think as such, it takes a bit more time, a bit more focus, broader focus for the organization to implement. So again, business continuity planning, I would expect to see in this level. And then in the security awareness, I think it's, also probably time for maybe a much more formalized external assessment to help the organization really identify and rank and prioritize maybe the technology investments that need to be made moving forward. So again, really detailed evaluation of the controls that are in place, that could be put in place for an organization to be able to check off all the boxes that they need to really ensure that their cybersecurity controls and protections are working for them. We see a lot of technology controls in here as well, and these tend to be a little bit more expensive as well. We've got the concept of device trust or maybe zero trust. There's a lot of different ways that this gets talked about. I think from most of us are familiar with the model of you want to access Office 365, you open up your web browser, you go to Office 365, you get access, you put in your username and password, no problem. Device trust or kind of zero trust would turn that on its head a little bit. So instead of any website being accessible from anywhere, from any device, access is only granted to trusted devices with known identities that have compliant software on their computer. So again, there's a lot more control that gets exerted over access to systems. It really reduces the surface area of your attack. So it's kind of jargony, but again, it's a much more focused way to provide access. So I think from the cyber ops side, the incident hunting side, one of the challenges that we face with working from home is now, we're seeing IP address connections come from all over the place. Whereas before we could clearly say, oh, this person's working in the office, great. That's a known good connection. Now people are working all over the place. They're using VPN connections. And so it's much, much harder to troubleshoot and to identify potentially malicious connections. And it's also a lot more difficult to kind of secure because we're not able to say, hey, we're only going to allow access from X, Y, or Z location. Now it needs to be a lot more broad in terms of the access, so how access is given. So if you can kind of flip that on its head and say, we're only going to allow access to our systems from trusted devices, then you really narrow your surface area. And that kind of leads into the next line item here, which is a bunch of acronyms for CASB and SASE. Everybody loves those acronyms. And it kind of sounds like a bunch of marketing mumbo jumbo, but I think these are kind of real and meaningful technology controls that we're starting to see more clients explore and implement. CASB stands for Cloud Access Services Broker, and then SASE is Secure Access Service Edge. So again, these are ways to provide kind of managed egress points for access into your network. So again, as many things are now purely cloud, you're able to, these tools would say they're able to validate the devices and the users, provide access to a list of managed applications, report and audit, and provide governance information around those applications, and potentially other security controls around that. So again, they provide some comprehensive security around that. So, Microsoft includes some elements of this within their platform. Cloudflare has also provided some access to this as part of their platform. There's dedicated vendors that do this. This is, I think, a burgeoning area, and more organizations, I think, are going to take advantage of it as a way to secure and manage and provide access to their cloud applications. So again, potentially a new entry into our list of optimized technology controls, and I think something that's worth taking a look at if you've been able to do some of the other things as prerequisites. We also have vulnerability scanning and penetration testing here as additional technology controls. I think once you've been able to focus on all those other things, your devices are updated, they're secured, you're doing patching, you've got your security tools in place, then I think it's worth maybe investing in some of these additional vulnerability scanning systems so that they can scan to detect where you may have gaps. So again, this may be appropriate to larger organizations that still have some on-prem server infrastructure. I think we're starting to see some additional tools become available for looking at access to cloud systems to see what gaps there might be in terms of governance and compliance or access issues that those applications may have. But again, vulnerability scanning and penetration testing as well. So again, penetration testing, I would frame that as, again, it tends to be very expensive because you're enlisting the help of highly skilled, highly trained set of security testers that are going to attack your organization as if they were a malicious adversary. So again, they will maybe use some automated tools. They may use some additional tools and techniques to attempt to infiltrate your organization, your network, and then develop a detailed list of recommendations and improvements for how to secure the organization. So again, some organizations may be required to do these, and if you are, you've got your path set out for you. I would say this would be one of the last things I would suggest doing for an organization. Make sure you've got all your other security controls in place before you invest in penetration testing engagement. And then the final tool here listed would be a SOC, or Security Operations Center, or a SIEM, a Security Information Event Center. These are really tools and platforms that take all of that event information that we've been talking about. So again, from your single sign-on solution, maybe from your device management solution, from your endpoint detection and response solution, and suck it all up into one data platform so that then you can analyze and correlate data across multiple different platforms. So, the examples are given of, you would be able to see an email come through your filter, land in somebody's inbox, see who opened it, see who else that email went to, was it malicious, and be able to track down and provide reporting. So again, this may be a control that you're required to have if you've got data retention requirements or logging retention requirements. This is kind of the way that you would be able to do and meet those compliance requirements. So again, kind of a lot of different things here in terms of the technology and policy and training elements that are available for organizations to follow. And so I wanted to just also mention, in terms of getting started, I think there's a lot of data that we talked about, a lot of different things that you could do. And I just wanted to say that there's no one right way to do things. I think we've seen organizations be successful in many different ways. They've been successful from a bottom-up approach. Somebody in IT really takes ownership and leads the process. We've also seen top-down be effective in terms of executive leadership, or maybe the board decides that this is something that needs attention, and it's a top-down approach. There's no one right way for an organization to get started with getting traction on this. Bottom line, somebody needs to decide that it's important and then take action. So if you're looking at getting started, I would say that it's important to leverage your existing requirements. That may be your organization already has some kind of formal compliance mandate that you need to meet, whether that be HIPAA, whether it be FERPA, whether it be organizations that have to do that deal with credit card information in any form need to follow PCI compliance standards that's appropriate for them. So again, there's probably already a compliance standard that you're supposed to be following, and you can use that as a way to jumpstart this process if you feel like you're not able to get traction. I think it's important that the organization would, establish an IT working group. Again, I don't think this is something that just one person can take on at an organization. It probably needs to have multiple stakeholders as a way to provide some structure and accountability and broader perspective. So again, it's not something that IT is gonna come in and like make everybody secure. That's not how it's going to work. IT needs to work with other departments in order to implement these controls effectively. I think it's important to connect with a partner to execute on this. These are really specialized controls in some place. And so you don't need to reinvent the wheel for yourself. There's lots of skilled and talented partners that are out there that will help you navigate this and provide some tailored consulting and solutions that'll work for you so that you can leverage their experience and not need to try to build it all up in yourself. So again, you can find a partner that's going to be a good, I think, a good companion and a good partner, not somebody that's just going to drop in some solutions and then walk away. So I think it's important that there's education, engagement, awareness, so that you understand what's being recommended, what's being implemented, and then how it's being carried out. And then finally, if you're large enough or you're able to, I think, having board engagement is really important. Again, if your board, it's likely they already have a governance committee. This is something that may fall under their purview. So again, engaging with the board and some way to connect up to the ladder to make these meaningful changes, I think is really important. So I would encourage that. And we're running out of time. I did want to highlight here, I'm happy to have a conversation. If you have questions, you can drop an email to cybersecurity@communityit.com. You could also book some time with me directly. That's my meeting link. And Johan, you want to put that in the chat? That's great. I'm happy to have a conversation and answer questions that you may have about how you can get started with cybersecurity at your organization. And I'll actually be back next month, along with our colleague Peter Mears at Build Consulting, to talk about cybersecurity specifically and about budgeting for that. So we'll probably take some of this information and talk a little bit about putting this all into action in terms of the budget and budget development for this. Johan, were there any comments or questions that I didn't get to or required a little bit of follow-up?
I don't think so. It was very thorough. Thank you, Matt. I always enjoy these webinars. I'm constantly learning about cybersecurity. It's something that I'm interested in, but also is vital for us as a managed services provider. And these are always really very helpful and informative. There are a few questions I was able to answer along the way, and no outstanding questions at this time, but I would encourage everyone to take advantage of Matt's offer to meet up, and you can schedule time with him. You can reach out to us through cybersecurity@communityit.com, and if you had a security question that you weren't ready to ask it, that's fine. We are here. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you again, Matt, for your time and for all the great information you shared with us. And we look forward to seeing everybody next month.
All right, great. All right. Thanks so much.
Take care. Thanks so much for attending. Community IT does these free webinars for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders. And you could attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. Never miss a new video by subscribing here on YouTube.
Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.